Good morning. Am I up? Ooh. Good morning, Furcation. Are you all nice and awake on a Sunday morning? Usually I'd say that and get a reaction. Anyway, this is electronics for dogs, but just bear in mind that this isn't specifically for dogs. All animals allowed. It's a beginner's guide to fursuit electronics. I last did this panel in 2014, and I figured, given the success of the Suit Builders meetup, so the Fursuit Electronics meetup at Furcation last year, it was time to run it again, just for the benefit of the people who are getting into this afresh and haven't had the, just to take into account some of the changes in what's available on the market these days, because a lot has changed and it is a lot easier to get into this than it ever has been. So why would you want to do this? First of all, well, it's really to enhance the performance of you in suit. It's not to replace fursuit acting in any way. You still have to act the character, you have to engage people, but this can make it easier to do and allow you to play different character roles than you otherwise would be able to. The best example that springs to mind that you'll probably know is Beauty of the Bass with the Smiler suit, which has effectively a built-in speaker, amplifiers, music system. It's effectively a walking nightclub dance. So with a suit like that, you can turn up on the con floor, turn the music on, start dancing. That's how that specifically enhances the performance. You've also got things like LEDs, which are a little bit more subtle, but you can have, for instance, glowing LED eyes. If you have a dragon, LEDs in the muzzle, LEDs in the eyes, breathe fire. So yeah, that's another little enhancement if you're trying to be a scary dragon. You can also make the suit a lot more comfortable to wear. People don't really think of it as an animatronic edition. It kind of is, kind of isn't. It's more an electronic edition, but a muzzle fan is a really good addition to most fursuits. Just to get air circulating, pull air in. You can put them in the muzzle, that's where most people put them, so it will pull air in, and it goes generally out of the neck and out of the through the foam work. But you can also put them in the ears, blowing out, and they will just create negative pressure inside the head, suck air through, and it goes out through the ears. Which is more practical? It's a question of which is most practical for a suit, which one you do. They're roughly as effective as each other. Although it's gaining in popularity, the LED glow side of animatronics is getting quite noticeable now. There are suits which, for instance, Day has made one which the entire head underneath the fur has just LED after LED, and can load patterns on that. And he uses that with his dance sets, DJ sets, and that's quite effective. But it's actual animatronics moving things is still quite rare. So I've personally done moving ears, and sound is very rarely done. So these are all little things that make your suit a little bit more unique than just a fursuit on its own. The suits I've talked about there were all full suits. There's nothing saying that you can only do this with a full suit. You can certainly, there are things you can do with the head, LEDs, goggles, things like that are just as effective on a partial fursuit. You've also got options with costuming that you don't have with full suits, that you can do on a partial suit. So there's things you can do with the clothing you're wearing with the suit. And the last reason, now I've gone on for a little bit, because it's fun. It can be quite challenging to put these together, but there is nothing more rewarding than seeing a crowd of people get a buzz out of you entertaining them in suit. It's really quite fun. It's the same reason people fursuit anyway, or one of the key reasons at least. thing to bear in mind is we're playing with electricity here. It might only be 5 volts, 6 volts, 12 volts at the top end usually, but it's still an electrical circuit. There is a safety risk there. Potentially, if you're using kind of radio controlled battery packs, for instance, I'll just grab one from here. I should have my props ready, shouldn't I? These are about 10 volts. This is a lithium ferrite pack, lithium ferrophosphate. They're sold for RC cars, 1600 milliamp hours. Needs a special charger. Can provide 25 times its rated capacity. So if you see the 25C there, 25C means the maximum current is 25 times the capacity. It's 1.6 amps. That's going to be it's going to be pretty close to 50 amps. So that's a lot of power in a small space. So you need to be really careful with how you wire these up. You can buy automotive fuse holders on eBay that will just wire in circuit. You can get them that crimp onto the wires. And they're quite, you should have one on the output of the battery. It's, if you don't have a fuse there, if something shorts out, a fire under a fursuit is not a great thing, especially if you're wearing it. The thing to bear in mind is that the acrylic furs, the fake furs that tend to be used to build fursuits, don't burn, they melt. So what you find is that if something gets very hot underneath the fur, it melts the fur. You've now got this puddle of molten plastic stuck to your skin. It's going to cause a lot of damage. If it gets really, really hot, it will ignite. It just tends not to sustain a flame. But if you keep putting energy into it, it's just like, if you hold a match to something, it's going to keep burning. So, you can use smaller batteries. There are little PP3 size 9 volt batteries or AA batteries. You can get holders for those very easily. They're less risky. There's not a lot of power in them. If you short them out, they'll get warm for a few minutes and then stop. But it's still good practice to have a fuse in line with the battery, just a smaller fuse. The data sheets for the batteries will actually tell you what they're capable of providing. The other thing worth bearing in mind is this is the one that's not on the slides, USB power banks. So that's an Anker USB power bank, and these are really high quality things. They make these in a variety of different sizes. You've got a little switch on the side to turn it on. As long as you draw more than a minimum kind of current from these, they will stay switched on. It's usually about 10-15 milliamps. If you're not reaching that, put a resistor across it, it'll stay on. Chances are you're not going to hit that low limit anytime soon. 2 USB ports. This specific one can do 5 volts at 2 amps, and it's worth getting one of the little USB power meters, for voltage current meters. Just plugs into there. You plug your thing into there, you can see how much current you're drawing and make a rough estimate of how long your battery is going to last while you're out in suit. I mean, this one, I can't remember what the capacity of this is. It's probably something like 20 amp hours. They are quite, there's all the limiting in there for you, and it provides a nice clean 5 volts. So they're very convenient if you don't need the high voltages for LEDs and things. Soldering is the other thing. You're going to need to learn to solder to do this. You don't need a several £100 Metcal or paste soldering station to do this, not by any means. The TS100 is a very low cost kind of entry level soldering iron. You can buy on eBay, runs off a laptop charger. If you've got an old broken laptop, you can pretty much take the charger off it, plug it into the back of the TS100, and that'll work quite well for you. It's, from what I was told by a friend who has one, the custom firmware makes it a lot more usable. You just USB port in the back, plug it into your computer, download firmware, it's ready to go. It gives you a bit more control. So while you're soldering, you're into the temperatures around 200-300 degrees Celsius. If you touch the tip of that soldering iron, you are going to get burned. There is no two ways about it. Do not skimp on soldering stands. £20 for a soldering iron stand versus several weeks of healing. It's not really No, there's not really any question there. You know, it's better to just avoid the injury in the first place. Solder fume extractors. I'm going to be putting the design for this thing on Thingiverse in the coming weeks. Now I've finished it. This is a 3D printed fume extractor. So there's a vacuum cleaner HEPA filter on this end. There's a piece of flexible hose, again 3D printed, that goes on here. Little valve there, and that fan came out of an old server, so that's 12 volts at several amps and moves a lot of air. So it's quite noisy, but it does mean that you're not breathing in the quite nasty fumes from this stuff. I'd certainly recommend, if you're getting started in this now, you don't really have much of a choice as to what solder you use. In the old days, people were using sort of tin lead, 6040 and 6337 tin lead. It's not really an option to buy that anymore. That's no longer available due to the changes in REACH and ROHS, so Reduction of Hazardous Substances legislation has changed, so you just can't buy that as a private individual. There are quite a few lead-free solders. The technology's advanced since 6 years ago. Tin whiskers isn't really an issue anymore. It solders about as well as tin lead, just at a slightly higher temperature, and lead is a nasty thing to be handling anyway. Just go straight to the tin lead, get a decent electronic solder from a reputable brand like Kester, Multicore, or Stanol, and it'll solder as well as any tin lead. When you're making solder joints, you're working with molten metal. You are literally melting a piece of metal to fill a joint and to connect two components. If it looks like it's cooled, just wait a couple of seconds, a couple of minutes. It's not gonna, a little bit of patience won't hurt, and it just gives it a little bit more time to cool. Also, if you move a solder joint while it's molten, it will create what is called a dry joint, where part of it has solidified and part of it hasn't, and it's just not a reliable connection. As far as soldering irons go, at the bottom end to start with, there are sort of £25 for a kit with a stand. So the Antex ones are fairly light duty. I've not really seen them sold outside of the UK. They're fine for normal use. If you've got the money to spend, a Weller WHS 40, if they still make that, it's one of the old standbys. It's a 40-watt soldering station, and that has temperature control. So if you're working with delicate components, you can sort of dial the temperature down a little bit, and the benefit you get from that is you're less likely to cause damage. The solder joints will cool quicker, less likely to get a bad solder joint. Things are more consistent. It's worth the extra money. There are also options in between the two. I said earlier about the TS100. You can just buy those off eBay or Amazon. Sort of next day delivery. Sometimes with a power supply, and they come in at less price than the Weller iron, and that's the same kind of features and functionality. The cheap own brand ones are what they are. Some people find them good, but the problems you're going to have with them is the temperature control's not going to be as good as the name brand products, and you might find it difficult to get things like spare soldering iron bits for them. Parts availability. I've got a hot air desoldering station to my left, and sometimes you can't get the parts for 6-7 months at a time. It's just they have to come on the slow boat from China. There's no one else that makes them. So it can be difficult if you're kind of 3 weeks from a convention. You just can't get the parts. You can't get a spare bit. Helping hands. They are these little things. So you have two crocodile clips on here, and they hold a little piece of wire you're soldering. You clip it into one side, clip it into the other. Magnifying glass to help you see what you're doing, and they just sit on the desk like that. They've got a heavy cast base, and they hold the wires while you're soldering them, so you get a nice, it's not going to move around while you're trying to solder it. There are other little things you can get as well. If you've got a 3D printer, you can download the models for these little, it's not very easy to see, is it? It's black. That's a little wire holder. You can download the model from Thingiverse and 3D print those. If you just search for soldering aids, you'll find most of them. And then the second one is kind of a newer version of the helping hands. Again, you can just 3D print, and it's, you know, you just need a couple of decent quality rubber bands to act as the spring mechanism there, and the serrated jaws will keep quite a good grip on the wire for you. I tend to use these now more than the helping hands, actually. I've mentioned solder there. I'm going to put these slides up online afterwards. I'll drop the link in the Discord when I do, and I'll probably tweet this out as well, so you can get these. You know, you're looking £15 for a roll of solder. 100 grams doesn't sound like a lot. This is a 250 gram reel of solder, and in practice that's going to last several years. You know, it's not, you don't use it as fast as you might think. It's maybe a few centimeters for each joint. Flexible wire, you can get little packs, in fact, of equipment wire now from again Amazon. You just get these little packs that have got silicone insulated stranded wire, 5 colours, no sorry 6 colours, one of them's slipped inside, and that is 24 AWG, so that's American wire gauge. That's good to probably a couple of amps, so it's good for most general wiring, and because it's silicone insulated it's quite flexible as well. Red and black are the two main colours you want for power and ground. It's worth having a couple of extra colours in, just for, you know, for data signal lines, just so you can tell at a glance, you know, that's, you know, a clock, that's data. You know, you're going to have to reuse the colours a little bit, but it still means that you're only looking at 2 possible options rather than however many wires you've got, possible combinations. Heat shrink sleeving is worth having as well. It's just a little plastic tube. You apply about 120 degrees Celsius of heat with a hot air gun, and it shrinks to half its nominal diameter, so half its starting diameter. You could also get 3:1 ratio and glue lined. The glue lined is really good to have, especially if you can get glue lined 3:1. So that's got hot glue along the inside edge, and what it will do is when it shrinks to the wire, it will stick to it. It won't slip off, move around. Catches, if you need to redo that joint, you're going to have to cut the heat shrink off. You're going to lose a little bit of wire. You can't just slice down it with a knife and peel the heat shrink off and repair the joint. It's just not possible. Connectors, you can get wonderful little connector kits from eBay these days. The little JST 2-pin connectors are good for power and speakers and things like that. You've also got things like the if you're connecting to PCBs, they're the Molex KK, or the copies of the Molex KK connectors. You need a crimp tool for these. The crimp tool looks like this, and you can buy these for 15 or 20 pounds. They're not up to the same standard as the several £100 manufacturer branded ones. In practice, they cost £20. If it breaks, buy a new one. As much as I hate to say that from, you know, the reduce, reuse, recycle point of view, you know, they are cheap enough that if you do something silly and break the jaws, it's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things. And then those are more of the same. The JST SM connectors are these ones. So again, these are 2.5 inch pitch, 2.5 millimeters pitch. So very easy to work with, and you just have a little latching connector like that. So there's a little snap latch that holds that in place, holds it mated to the other connector, and then you have the other side of the connector, which is this here. So it's also got little snap latches, so if you want to mount these to a panel, you can do that. Again, you just use the same crimp tools for a lot of these. There are two different types. One does the JST connectors, the other does the Molex KK connectors. A power source you should always have on a socket, so that's the one with the holes on it that takes the pin, also known as the female side of the connector, if you're going with the gendered conventions, but more commonly these days the industry has moved to socket or receptacle for that side. The reason you do that is so that if you have, for instance, some coins or keys in your pocket and you have that connector on a battery, you're not going to end up in a situation where the coins or the key are shorting out your battery. So if you put the pins on the side that receives power, it's a convention you can follow, that you can see what connects to what. It's going to stop you mixing up and connecting two batteries together, and it just stops things shorting out for you. You've also got the higher current connectors like the XT60. You can get these from hobby shops. You can get these online. They're for things like large arrays of LEDs with sort of 12-volt power supplies for handling a lot of current. The XT60 is rated at 60 amps. You are, unless you're doing big LED clusters, you're probably not going to hit that kind of current. I was going to show off the. This has been a project that's been on the go for about 6 years. I'm ashamed to say. I'm restarting it this year, so I want to do this year I'm going to be doing next year now, an animatronic fursuit head. With actuator driven ears, but this kind of leads me into the sort of the visual demo quite nicely. I've covered batteries. So a couple of years ago, you can see this on my YouTube account, I did an animatronic ear for a fursuit. It's a Khajiit fursuit built by Fursuit costumes. So you can see the way this works is you've got a little micro RC servo. So these are sold for things like moving the steering in RC cars, and the flight control surfaces in RC aircraft. So very small. This is just thin foam sheet, sometimes called foamies. It's just, you cut it to shape for the ear, you put the fur around that, and this gives you the ear shape. So it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward to cut that out. And then the servo, you can get libraries for the Arduino. This is the big thing that has changed in the last couple of years, is the easy availability of the Arduino and Teensy microcontroller platforms. You buy a little board that is the size of a first-class large letter stamp that has 10, 20 I/O pins that you can connect to things. But you also have the software ecosystem there as well. You can download the Arduino IDE and get started very quickly. And there are libraries to control servos, and you just tell it, I want servo at 0%, servo at 100%. They're analog electronics internally, most of them, so you will need to calibrate the 0 and 100% positions to the end stops for the servo. So if you give it a 1 millisecond 0% pulse to one servo, the angular position will be slightly different across between two, and you just have to kind of adjust the software to deal with that. This is the full suit with both, so the full resin head with both the ears attached. So I'll just switch that to full screen so you can see it better. And you can see that what's happening there is the signals for both ear servos are calibrated, so they know what their end stops are individually, and then the software that's running them is calculating things like what 90 degrees is to both of them, and doing those little movements. When that was completed, the ears actually did this kind of wagging motion via a little switch. So there's a little control board you can see here with a PIC microcontroller attached. I'll just pull up that last frame and pause it. You can see there, so that goes to the servos, with a little bit of wire, battery connection on one side, and then some switches to control it. So you push one switch for sort of move all the way down, and then you've got a left and a right switch to control each ear individually. So that's all fairly. That's from quite a few years ago, but it does show you what you can do. I'm just going to make my camera full screen now. I did a video on these not long ago. These are the LED goggles you'll have probably seen me wearing for the last couple of years while I was out fursuiting. Now these are quite easy to. I say they were quite easy to put together. They'd be very easy to put together now. The goggles you can buy again, eBay, Amazon. They call them steampunk goggles. They come by default with green welding glass installed. So what you can do with them is the eyes just unscrew, and then you have a sheet of glass at the front, a plastic spacer ring, and then I've used a hole saw with the centre drill taken out to cut down a piece of dark grey perspex to fit these. Now the reason you do that is because with clear glass you're going to see the LEDs, and I didn't want that. I want these to look like eyes. The other reason as well is the green welding glass attenuates the light too much and gives it a green tint, so it's a lot harder to do certain colour patterns. Power source is a lithium battery. I'm ashamed to say this is an unprotected lithium battery. I've been meaning to replace it with one with a protection circuit attached, but it's just never happened because it keeps working. In practice on a battery this size, it's not a big deal. Countering my own comment about burning lithium batteries, if I did it again, Poundland do these little £1 miniature power banks that would be perfect for this. So you see there, the two rings are Adafruit NeoPixel rings. The software is running on a ST Micro ARM processor, so that's a custom PCB that I've etched. If you were doing this yourself, you don't need to do the PCB etching. Yeah, unfortunately my camera isn't nice enough to focus for me there. You could use a Teensy to do this. That's again another ARM processor, but it has the Arduino ecosystem behind it. You've got the Arduino itself, the Pro Micro, the Pro Nano, would all kind of fit in these glasses. And you just hot glue them in place. The other thing I didn't mention is the plastic ring that holds the NeoPixels. That's 3D printed, which leads me into 3D printing. 3D printing, the cost has plummeted and the difficulty has plummeted. So you can get printers like the Creality Ender 3, which is a self-build kit. It'll take you maybe 2 days to put one of those together. Costs a few £100. Very reasonable for what you can do with it, and you can download. You've got websites like Thingiverse, which you can just download 3D models of most anything you could want. You can even download 3D models of fursuit heads. So this one is one by Theo, a German fur who does a lot of work for the Eurofurence Puppet Show. He has quite a few 3D printable head bases available. You can scale these up or down. Maybe you want to make a puppet, maybe you want to make an actual fursuit head. And he's got a really good blog as well that he's linked to on the left here, where he shows how he's built these, what he's done, the puppets. He's got a website with all the puppets on there. So if you just search for Fursuit Head on Thingiverse, or again, if you collar me in one of the text chats later this afternoon, I'd be happy to give you the links for all of these. So you can, with a 3D printer, you can literally download a model. The old joke of, the old meme of, you wouldn't download a movie, you wouldn't download a Fursuit Head and 3D print it. Well, now you can, and people will let you do it. Obviously, there's still room in the market for, there are people that still design and build the heads. If you want different designs, if this doesn't quite look right, you've got the option of modifying it. But if you don't want that effort, there's still room for just buying an off-the-shelf Dream Vision Creations or similar Fursuit head base to work from. So that's all fairly easy to sort of get your head around what you can do with this, but also things like this is from last year and was debuted at a con last year. This is the box for the per engine sound effect generator. So again, this is 3D printed. Inside there is an ESP32 microcontroller, so if you're kind of watching the maker community, you'll recognise that as being the 32-bit Wi-Fi and Bluetooth enabled one. Doesn't have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth yet. I've just used that processor because it has 2 analog outputs which go into an audio amplifier. Connect the battery up, I'll do a little demo of this one, continue to talk. It has 2 analog outputs which go into an audio amplifier, and then the speaker outputs go to a muzzle and a chest speaker. So I can't take credit for the design work that's gone into this. This was designed by Revit, an American firm who you might recognise the name from the AnthroCon videos some years ago, the US Furrycon videos. This you have the webbing straps that are just sewn onto the side there, and they just it just fit, goes over your neck, around your chest in that kind of position, and will make a purring sound, or will when I haven't dropped the battery. So there's a little a Hall effect sensor here. So it's a tiny little thing that just goes on your fingertip, and then a magnet will trigger it. It's not the best way to do it, and I found this out in quite a amusing way when I debuted this, because it turns out the handrails at that convention are plated steel. So I had the magnet in my thumb, I put my hand on a handrail, there was a loud clang, and then I found that I couldn't get my hand off the handrail. I had to take the glove off, I slid it along the handrail. It's easier to slide a magnet than it is to pull it. It attracts more in that direction with more force. But you just touch it with a magnet. Unfortunately, I don't think my mic's picking this up. But it generates a sound effect like a cat purr, which with a snow leopard, if you walk up to someone, hug them, and then start purring, you can imagine the kind of reaction. If they own a cat, they recognise it quite quickly. If they've never handled a pet cat, they kind of pause for a few seconds while they try and make the mental connection. It is, it's quite entertaining, and if you're sort of laid with a couple of other fursuiters on a couch or something, or just hugging someone, and you just sort of start purring all of a sudden, it's you get some funny reactions. So this is what I was sort of driving into. It's enhancing the performance, especially if it's something you wouldn't expect. So I'm just going to open up the Twitch chat now, and I'm going to see if anyone's asking questions, if you'll just give me a second to load it. So unfortunately, if you've been asking questions, I'm not going to see them, and you're going to have to repost. If you've got any questions, please drop them in the Twitch chat now, and I'll try and answer them for you. Unless anyone, I'll just have a quick look and see if anyone has dropped any questions on. Our Discord has crashed. Okay. Let's see if anyone's asking anything in the clubhouse. No. No questions. Okay, Twitch chat questions. With unlimited budget and time, what would I build? Ooh, good one. a protogen is the answer to that. I would build a protogen. But that would also require some significant ups in a skill. I see Pico like my comment about a protogen. Yeah, I really want a protogen just because of what you can do with the LED. Excuse me, with the LED lights and the performance and stuff. You can get these little controller boards that take HDMI in or MIPI DSI in, which MIPI DSI is what the Raspberry Pi outputs for its LCD panel. So they'll take that in from a Raspberry Pi or a Pi Zero, and you can connect that up to an LED array, like a bank of WS2811 LEDs, and it just gives you this display, and that would be, I think, absolutely fantastic. Capacitive sensor, cheers for that one, Turbo Tails. Yes, a capacitive sensor would be a good one. The issue I've got with my suit specifically is I have very thick paw pads made of silicone on the paws. So if you've got just sort of fabric paw pads, that'll probably work quite well. Again, you can buy the capacitive sensors. The other thing is, because you've got the sensor mounted on your finger, it may pick up the finger behind and trigger. So you might need a little bit of shielding behind the sensor to stop it picking up your finger. But it's pretty reasonable. Lupo, I'm sorry I can't say the rest of your name, 42. What 3D printer software is best for beginners? What 3D printer software is best for beginners? I would download for modelling. I can't really advise. For organic modelling, I keep hearing Blender being mentioned. FreeCAD is another. Fusion 360. I'm not sure if there's still a student version of SolidWorks. They're the big dogs. If you've got more of a programming kind of head on you, then OpenSCAD might work better for you. OpenSCAD, you effectively say cube here, this position, these dimensions, and then cylinder here with these dimensions, and then merge the two together. You know, a Boolean operation, a union would combine them. You can use, for instance, take the cube and the cylinder and cut the cylinder out of the cube, and you're just telling it in lines of code what you can do, which means you also, if you write the code correctly, you can use variables there and make your model what's known as a parametric model, where you can change the parameters, and you can maybe do, for instance, an ear gauge for a fursuit, and then you can size it up and down to suit different sizes of ear, which is quite useful. In terms of actually running the printer, that's an easier recommendation to make, Prusa Slicer. The other one that people are using these days, I haven't personally used, is Cura, C-U-R-A. But Prusa Slicer I have installed here. It just takes a moment to load. And I'll just switch the slide to the camera for you for a second there. There we go. And this has, I've actually got an Ender 5 3D printer, but the Ender 3 kind of printer profile works quite well for it as long as you change the vertical height, because the Ender 5 is a taller printer and can print up to about 30 centimeters tall models. This is in expert mode. If I switch it back to simple, you only get the settings you need to worry about: print quality, which is layer height, type of material you're using, so ABS, PETG, PLA. If you're getting started in this, I wouldn't suggest ABS, it's a nightmare. Start with PLA and PETG. Especially PLA is very easy to get started with and very easy to glue two pieces together. If you have a Dremel, you can put a sort of a 3 centimeter long piece of PLA into the chuck of the Dremel at low speed, sharpen the end, and you can use that to actually weld two pieces together. You hold the two pieces together and then run a weld seam along, and then you'll eventually get to the point where it's just you've used enough of the plastic rod that you just need to replace it with a new one. You do need to straighten it out first, otherwise it will just flop and wander in the Dremel chuck. But it isn't a way to plastic weld. The other way to do it as well is PLA melts at quite a low temperature, actually slightly below the boiling point of water. So the other thing you can do is get a cup of hot water, just fresh out of the kettle. Put the PLA, a cut off piece of PLA filament in there, and you can just leave that to heat up for a minute or two, and apply that straight to the side of the. Just fish it out of the water with a teaspoon, and apply that straight to the weld seam. Hot air works as well for keeping it warm. Again, just heat it up. Well, push the plastic into there. Tio has done some tutorials on that, which are well worth a look. There's a lot of ways to do that with PLA, just exploiting its low melting point. What else we got? What got me into electronics? Okay, my uncle did electronics at university and then moved into IT. But while he was studying at university, he used to come round to visit, and every time would bring an electronics book that he'd finished with, or a box of components, or a little Maplings kit. So I blame him. I blame him for this slippery slope. If you ask my mother, she'll probably tell a different story, involve me sticking keys in main sockets, which I would strongly suggest you don't do. Yeah, we used to have the little finger guards on main sockets because of me. And my dad still hasn't forgiven me for taking apart his wood grain Atari 2600 as a kid and losing most of the parts. So yeah, it's just a fascination of figuring out how stuff works. If you've had a look at my website, in fact, I'm going to actually just put a little I'm going to put my website and TOs as well. So you've got them. So that's just a link to TO, and I'll just make that clear that me. There you go. So I mentioned, I mentioned TO stuff earlier. His live journal links to all the stuff he's done. My website there, I've put some of the projects on, but not many of the furry ones. If you're interested in those, drop me a PM on Telegram. A lot of them are actually on GitHub. So again, github.com/philpem, so this little bit here. And things like the purr engine are on here as well. So you just find that, and there's all the code for the cat purr synthesizer just sat there. Google SketchUp. Yeah, SketchUp is owned by Trimble now. Did I have anything unexpected happen during a project but decide it was better than what I originally intended? That's a tough one to answer off the top of my head, most of them. The LED goggles were done in the last couple of days leading up to... Click the right button. Were done in the last couple of days leading up to Confuzzled 2015. And were literally finished the night before. I had an STM32 programmer and all the source code on my laptop in case I needed to tweak them, but it took me until midnight the night before the con to get them working. I was originally going to have the patterns changing, so there's a couple of different patterns programmed in. Due to a software bug, the patterns don't change, it's just the rainbow pattern with the eyes. I've never fixed the software bug because I think the rainbow eyes is fabulous, frankly. Fabulous in the yeah, in the very gay sense. um, uh, I played off the kind of gay snow leopard thing at Eurofurns with rainbow ribbons in my tail one year, so I'm not afraid of doing that. Copper EMC film behind the sensor should work. For a capacitive sensor, yeah, it should. Probably just have to ground it to the sensor ground as well. Wires running around a fursuit. Would twisted wires be better for durability, or does it not matter too much? Don't twist them. You don't need to, and they will become untwisted. The best way I've found to keep wires tidy, there's two ways to do it. Plastic zip ties are one reason. I'm sure you've all seen these. What you really need for these are a pair of very narrow, sort of very flat flush cutters. So these are these are Lindstrom ones that are ludicrously expensive. The ones that you'll have seen here, there, and around. If I could find a set, I have some of the Amtool ones kicking around that are just red handles with flush cutter blades. Unfortunately, maybe I don't have them hanging around. A set of electronics sort of wire cutters work okay, but will leave a bit of a sharp flash there. So there's two ways to deal with that. You can put a dot of hot glue on there, which will just sort of leave you a smooth round surface. The other thing you can do is take a file, a metal file like this one, but probably something a little bit smaller. In fact, the needle files are probably better. So these are a couple of pounds, and you just get a little assortment of very fine surface needle files for doing very fine work. They're brilliant and well worth having around. Or you can use the little Amtool kind of flush cutter nippers, and they will cut close enough that the remains of the strap will not be very sharp. This is hard with the chat scrolling. The other way to tie wires up, and this doesn't get a lot of attention these days, but it's used widely in aerospace. This is lacing cord. So what this is a this is a wax coated fabric string, like a cotton thread. It's what is it? It doesn't say the diameter on it. It's probably only about 2 millimeters total diameter, maybe less than that, maybe about 1. What you do with this is you cut off a little piece of it and you just tie it into a little knot. There's a specific knot that you do. Don't do like a box knot or a granny knot. They will just come undone in no time. But there are tutorials linked from Hackaday on how to use lacing cord. And if you just imagine my finger is the bundle of wires there, you pull it tight and tie a knot. That's going to stay in place. The other thing you can do is running stitches. So you get you start it off at one end and then run it underneath, out, and you get an end it at the other end, and you have this whole bundle that will move as one, which is very convenient for things like Fursuit electronics, where you're running like bundles of 6, 7, 10, 12 wires, and you can just buy that from. It's not as easy to find as it was. I think you can still get it from RS. Farnell might have it as well. Someone's probably selling it on eBay. What else have we got there? Blender is much better. It's come along. Yeah, Blender has come along. Most challenging project I've worked on. Probably the Khajiit ears. The Khajiit ears were a lot of new stuff. I had to sort of take a resin base and learn how to cut the ears, the ear shape. There was a fair bit of that was done on commission for Furuku costumes, actually. So there was quite a bit of communication and discussion to, what should the ears look like, what shape should they have, what should the motions look like, and the communication side wasn't challenging, but implementing that, taking the discussion and kind of extrapolating to an actual design was the hard bit there, and also just tweaking the code to get that working. On a design level, a few years ago, made by Mercury, did a suit called LDV, which I think is currently owned by Ash Blackthorn. He's one of the Furcation staff. He showed me it after he bought it. Yeah, I did the LEDs on that. That was difficult because that's got a dual LED driver in there, and it's designed to run off 4AA batteries. So the difficulty there is it's a switch mode LED converter, and the two converters interacted on the early design, and one would affect the other. The second, just power in general on that one was difficult because it started out, a goal was to get as much life out of 4AA batteries, so it's got things like a low voltage battery to 5 volts converter, and then after that all the logic is 5 volts. It's again a PIC microcontroller, and then the LED driver is on 5 volts as well and steps that down to the 3 volts the LED string uses. The LED string was custom as well because I couldn't get one bright enough, so I had to etch a flexible PCB, because at that point you could not get them as prototypes. I could get the materials, but I couldn't get a PCB fab to do like a 1 or 2 flexible PCBs for these ears. That's JLC PCB, and companies like that. No, they're not paying me to say that. You can just get circuit boards made in 2 weeks for $10 US. That just didn't exist at that point, especially for print flexible PCBs. What am I working on at the moment? At the moment, the Protogen has been an idea in the back of my mind for a while. The Fox I would like to resurrect. Now I have a 3D printer that's big enough to print the Fursuit head. As unfortunately the resin failed on the Fursuit head I bought for that, and it's just started sort of disintegrating. The muzzle is not in great shape, so I'm probably going to restart that from scratch, but I need to learn how to fur a Fursuit head. MOSFET based electronic fuses, never tried them, Findy, but I'm going to take that part number down now and put that into Google and probably buy a few of those to try out. RF controlled Protogens. Yeah, radio control is brilliant if you want to get rid of wires. The ESP32 and the ESP, the one before it, ESP something 66, 7866, are brilliant for this kind of thing. You just have Bluetooth low energy in one in the receive side, Bluetooth low energy in the controller side, pair them, and you only need to power the things. You've got 2 wires going between things rather than 20. It's a lot more convenient, provided you're not in an area where there are a lot of people using Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. I probably wouldn't try it on a convention the size of, for instance, Midwest Fur Fest, which is that 10,000 people these days? There's probably going to be a lot of Bluetooth garbage flying around the convention floor, and it might not be terribly reliable. Yeah, Bluetooth is brilliant because it's all type approved. You don't have to deal with is this frequency legal in the US? Is this frequency legal? What are the transmit time limits? It's 868 megahertz. You can only transmit for something like 1% of the time, and you have to keep track of that in software. Bluetooth, you just tell the radio, send a packet here, and it does it. You just give it a MAC address, and it's done. Wi-Fi is similar. Favorite games console from a design perspective? Famicom. Easily the Famicom, because Famicom Disk System. It's just such an interesting add-on. Nintendo did so many add-ons for that for the Japanese market. It's not just a games console, and it's sad that so few of them made it across to the NES. It's similar hardware, and you know, but if they were experimenting with things like games delivered over satellite, and you know, games on floppy disks, you could go to vending machines and buy floppy disks. It would just write the disk as you wait. Amateur radio has strict limits on what you can do. Yes, it does. Read your license schedule. Read your license notes, because it is very easy to fall foul of these regs accidentally. The one thing I would like to do though is an actual amateur radio fox hunt with a literal fox fursuiter. A fox hunt is find the transmitter. So you have a transmitter on someone, and the goal is to use radio receivers like the Baofengs and directional antennas to find the person. So it just sort of beeps every now and again and identifies itself. It's also known as ARDF, Amateur Radio Direction Finding. That's, if you've never heard of it, that's worth a Google search and a look into it. It's a whole lot of fun. I'd love to do it at a convention, but no convention I've ever suggested it to has ever authorised it as a panel or an event. The one time I tried to run it unofficially ended with people taking part being told by the convention security staff that they were hacking the convention's radio. So we weren't, but we quite quickly stopped it because of the misunderstandings. It wasn't finished, which was disappointing. But hopefully, we've got a few amateur radio operators on staff at Furcation. We can probably there's probably something we can maybe do for next year, and if I've got time, I might look into it. My problem is free time. Anyway, I've got 1 minute, less than a minute left to go, so I'm going to stop it there. Thank you for coming. Thank you for hanging around. Thank you for asking questions. You've been absolutely fantastic. And please enjoy the next event and enjoy the rest of Furcation Online. I'll see you in Discord momentarily.